5 men walked into a bar in Staten Island on March 8, 1929. They had one target, Lucky Luciano. 4 of them left in ambulances. The 5th walked out on his own 2 feet. Not because he was lucky, because he made a choice that saved his life. A choice the other 4 refused to make. To understand what happened in that bar, you need to understand who Lucky Luciano was in 1929. He wasn't lucky yet. That nickname came later. In March of 1929, he was still Salvatore Lucania, a 31-year-old rising enforcer in Joe Massuria's organization. He wasn't the boss. He wasn't even close. But he was building a reputation. Smart, ruthless, ambitious. The kind of man who made other men nervous. And one man in particular was very nervous. Salvatore Maranzano. Maranzano was the other major power in New York's Italian underworld. He was older than Luciano, more traditional, more connected to the old country ways. He ran his organization like a Roman legion. Discipline, hierarchy, respect for the old ways. And he hated Joe Massuria. The Castellammarese War was brewing. 2 families, 2 bosses, 1 city. Not enough room for both. Maranzano knew that eventually he'd have to fight Massuria. And he knew that Luciano was one of Massuria's best assets. Young, smart, capable. The kind of lieutenant who could turn the tide of a war. So Maranzano decided to send a message. Not to Massuria. To Luciano. Stop working for Massuria. Switch sides. Or die. The message was delivered through intermediaries. Quiet conversations in social clubs. Whispers in restaurants. Join us, Luciano. Massuria is old-fashioned, stuck in the past. We're building something new, better, more American. Luciano listened. He was always listening. But he didn't commit. He played both sides, gathering information, keeping his options open. That's what smart men did. They waited. They watched. But Maranzano wasn't a patient man. March 8, 1929. 9:15 p.m. Luciano was in Staten Island meeting with a bookmaker. Small operation, nothing major, just routine collections. The meeting was at a bar called Salvatore's. Neighborhood place. Quiet. Out of the way. Luciano liked it because it wasn't his usual territory. Nobody would expect him there. No one would bother him. He was wrong. The bar was small. 15 stools, 6 tables, 1 bartender. Maybe a dozen customers total. Working men mostly, drinking after a long shift. Luciano sat at a corner table with the bookmaker, counting money, going over numbers. His driver, a kid named Tony, waited by the door. At 9:45 p.m., 5 men walked in. They weren't loud. They weren't obvious. They just walked in like regular customers. Ordered drinks at the bar. 2 beers, 2 whiskeys, 1 gin. Casual. Normal. Tony noticed them immediately. Something was off. They weren't dressed like neighborhood guys. Too clean, too expensive. And they kept glancing at Luciano's table. Tony moved closer to Luciano, leaned down, whispered, "Boss, those guys at the bar." Luciano didn't look up from the cash. "What about them?" "Something's wrong." "You're paranoid." "Maybe, but..." Luciano looked up, saw the 5 men. They were spreading out now, subtle but deliberate. 2 still at the bar. 1 near the door. 2 moving toward the bathroom, which meant they'd pass right by Luciano's table. Luciano's eyes narrowed. He knew. "Get the car ready," he said quietly. "Back exit." Tony nodded, started moving toward the rear door. That's when everything happened. The man nearest the door pulled a knife. Not a gun. A knife. Long blade, 8 inches, the kind you gut fish with. He lunged at Tony, caught him in the shoulder before Tony could react. Tony went down hard, blood spreading across his shirt. The bookmaker scrambled backward, knocked over his chair, ran for the front door. One of the men at the bar grabbed him, threw him against the wall. The bookmaker slumped, unconscious. The other 3 converged on Luciano. No guns, just knives and fists. They wanted this quiet. A shooting would bring cops, witnesses, problems. But a bar fight? Men get hurt in bar fights all the time. Luciano stood up, knocked the table toward them. Cash and coins scattered. One man stumbled. The other two kept coming. The first one swung a knife at Luciano's throat. Luciano ducked, grabbed the man's wrist, twisted. The knife clattered to the floor. But the second man was already on him, throwing punches. Heavy, brutal punches. One caught Luciano in the ribs, another in the jaw. Luciano went down. Not unconscious, but down. On one knee, blood in his mouth. The third man picked up the dropped knife. They had him surrounded. 5-on-1. Tony was bleeding out by the door. The bookmaker was unconscious. The bartender had disappeared into the back. The customers? They ran. Every single one. Nobody wanted to see what came next. Luciano was alone. The man with the knife knelt down, put the blade against Luciano's throat. Close. Close enough that Luciano could feel the cold steel. Close enough to draw blood. You should have joined us when you had the chance, the man said. Italian accent. Heavy. Old country. Luciano didn't answer, just stared at him. Mr. Maranzano sends his regards. He's giving you one last opportunity. Work for him or die here. The other 4 men moved closer. Knives out now. All of them, circling like wolves. This was the moment. The choice. And Luciano made it. He smiled. Blood on his teeth, knife at his throat, and he smiled. You're gonna kill me? Luciano said quietly. If we have to, then do it. The man with the knife hesitated. What? I said do it. Cut my throat. Right here. Right now. Because that's the only way I stop working for Mafia. Silence. Luciano kept talking. Voice calm. Steady. Like he was discussing the weather. You walk in here with 5 men. 5. To give me a message from Maranzano. You know what that tells me? Tells me Maranzano's scared. He's so scared of me working for Mafia that he sent 5 men with knives instead of just putting a bullet in my head from across the street. The man with the knife pressed harder. A thin line of blood ran down Luciano's neck. Shut up. Why? Because I'm right? You weren't sent here to kill me. You were sent here to scare me. To make me switch sides. But here's the problem. I don't scare. One of the other men stepped forward. Boss said we could kill you if you refused. Luciano looked at him. Then refuse. I'm not working for Maranzano. Not today, not ever. So either kill me or get out of my bar. The 5 men looked at each other. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. The target was supposed to be scared, supposed to beg, supposed to cooperate. But Luciano wasn't begging. He was daring them to do it. The man with the knife at Luciano's throat spoke quietly. You're bluffing. Am I? Then test me. Cut deeper. See if I flinch. 5 seconds. 10. The knife stayed pressed against Luciano's throat. The man holding it was sweating now, his hand shaking slightly, because he understood something. If he killed Luciano, Mafia would retaliate. Not just against him, against Maranzano, against everyone. The war would start immediately, and Maranzano wasn't ready for that. But if he let Luciano go, he'd look weak, like he couldn't finish the job. Luciano saw the hesitation, and he pushed harder. You know what the difference is between me and you? Luciano said. You're here because someone told you to be. I'm here because I choose to be. You follow orders. I make decisions. And I've decided that I'm not dying today. So either prove me wrong, or get the hell out. The man with the knife stood up. Slowly, the blade moved away from Luciano's throat. This isn't over, he said. Luciano stood up. Blood still on his mouth, blood on his neck. He looked at the 5 men one by one. Yes, it is. Then Luciano did something nobody expected. He picked up the knife from the floor. The one that had been dropped earlier. He held it out, handle first, to the man who'd had the blade at his throat. You dropped this, Luciano said. The man stared at him, confused, angry, humiliated. Take it, Luciano said. Take it and leave, or stay and finish what you started. Your choice. The man took the knife. His hand was shaking. Let's go, he muttered to the others. They left. All 5 of them. walked out of that bar without finishing the job they'd been sent to do. Luciano watched them go. Then he walked over to Tony, who was still bleeding by the door. "You alive?" Tony groaned. "Barely." "Good. Let's get you to a doctor." The bookmaker woke up 10 minutes later. Cops never came. Nobody reported anything. In that neighborhood, you didn't talk to cops. Word spread fast. 5 men attacked Lucky Luciano. Only one walked out standing. And that one was Luciano. The story got exaggerated, of course. By the time it reached Maranzano, people were saying Luciano had fought off all 5 men. Broken bones, sent them running. Not true. But the truth was almost as powerful. Luciano hadn't fought them off. He'd stared them down, called their bluff, dared them to follow through on their threat. And when they hesitated, he won. 3 months later, the Castellammarese War officially started. Mafia versus Maranzano. Blood in the streets, bodies piling up. And Lucky Luciano? He played both sides, gathering power, making alliances, waiting for the right moment. When Mafia was killed in 1931, Luciano was at the table. When Maranzano was killed 5 months later, Luciano gave the order. And the 5 men who walked into that bar in Staten Island? 4 of them died during the war, killed in various hits by various people. The 5th man, the one who'd held the knife to Luciano's throat, he survived. Years later, after Luciano had become the most powerful mob boss in America, a reporter asked that man what Luciano was like. The man was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "I held a knife to his throat. I could have killed him, should have killed him. But when I looked in his eyes, I knew something." What? He wasn't afraid of dying. And a man who's not afraid of dying? You can't control him. You can't threaten him. All you can do is get out of his way. The reporter pressed, "Do you regret not killing him?" The man smiled, a sad, tired smile. "Every day of my life. But if I had killed him that night, his people would have killed me the next day. So maybe I made the right choice after all." March 8, 1929. 1 bar. 5 attackers. 1 target. For men left in ambulances because they didn't understand who they were dealing with. 1 man walked out because he made a choice. He let Luciano live. Not out of mercy, out of survival. And Luciano? He walked out because he'd learned something fundamental about power. Real power isn't about who has the most men or the most knives or the most guns. It's about who's willing to die standing up rather than live on their knees. If the story showed you what real power looks like, hit that like button. Subscribe for more untold stories from the underworld. Drop a comment. Could you have made the choice Luciano made? And turn on notifications because next week we're revealing the story of when Luciano walked into a meeting with 5 rival bosses, unarmed, and walked out controlling their entire territory. Remember, in the underworld, fear is a weapon, but only if your enemy can be scared. And Lucky Luciano couldn't be.